Hey guys, how's it going? I am Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. Yes, this is the final video of Stage 1. Or results, shall we say. There might be a video next week, let's see. I'll get to that at the end of the video anyway. We have our playoffs, but again, an end of video discussion. Let's start off in chronological order. Thursday, the February the 8th, I will get it right in a minute. We kicked off with the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Dallas Fuel. So, this was a pride match more than Stage 1 playoff potential massive match. But we did get an interesting match. Shanghai Dragons took 2 maps, but they didn't take the win. They put up a very good fight, but Fuel win it 3-2. I expected Fuel to turn up, and I thought it'd be a bit more convincing than it was. But Fuel will have another game later on, but we'll discuss that in a minute. After that, the San Francisco Shock take on the Gladiators, and that ends as Gladiators winning 3-1. The good Gladiators turn up. Finally, the good Gladiators turn up. You never know what you're going to get from day to day with the Gladiators. Are you going to get good Gladiators or bad Gladiators? We'll see that later on as well. This worried me for the Shock, because the Shock had to go up against the Seoul Dynasty later on in the weekend, but again, we'll get to that in a minute. Talking of Seoul go up against the Valiant. Now, at this point, Seoul were in an interesting position. They were in a playoff position. Very, very easy playoff position. On the other hand, Valiant needed to win this. This was a must-win for Valiant to get any hopes of a Stage 1 playoff place. And they needed to do it quite convincingly. And that's what they did. The Valiant beat Seoul 3-0. That is a shock. Hint, hint. That's a big upset. I expected this to go to 5 maps, and it didn't. This brought Valiant right back into contention. After that match, Valiant go up to 3rd place, above Seoul on map differential. So this was very, very big result, and Seoul then were put under massive pressure in their last game of Stage 1. But after that, another big game with playoff potential. Philadelphia Fusion, the outsiders for the playoffs, taking on the Boston Uprising, one of the mid-pack for the playoffs. Philadelphia Fusion did not turn up. The Uprising beat them 4-0. This eliminates the Fusion from the playoff places. They cannot get Stage 1 playoffs after that. Fusion needed to turn up. They needed to get a big win there. They didn't. Their differential was not in their favour anyway. They were the only playoff potential team with negative differential. So that wasn't the most of a surprise. Boston, however, they take the initiative. Although they don't get to quite where Valiant are, they do take the initiative. But after that, you had the Florida Mayhem taking on the New York Excelsior. This is, I expected Excelsior to dominate, and they did. But Florida Mayhem do get a map draw, which could come very, very crucial for whoever wants to win Stage 1. So the Excelsior beat Florida Mayhem 3-0. Then the biggest game arguably the biggest game so far with playoff potential, because obviously the Valiant beat the Seoul. But London Spitfire taking on the Houston Outlaws. Houston is a must-win. London, it's a win if you want to win the stage, in my opinion. And Houston win 3-1. Houston looked very, very convincing. Coolmat stood out for me. Very, very good diva play. London, this was the first time I saw London not have an answer. Obviously, Lynxer was back for Houston, and I think Lynxer is incredibly valuable for Houston. Without Lynxer, they don't win. I think we saw that against Seoul. And imagine what position Houston would be in if they'd won against Seoul. Because if they won against Seoul and they got the same result as they did on the Friday, then they would have been above London Spitfire. They could have been challenging the Excelsior. Very interesting, hey? I think we've got to say at the moment that Houston look like one of our strongest, if not our strongest, Western team, considering Dallas have not turned up. It's between them and Valiant, currently, I would say, although Boston have a game against Houston later on. Bearing in mind, this segment of the video has been recorded before that Houston-Boston game. So, bear that in mind. We'll talk about that later on. Next three fixtures. The Fuel in action again against the Shields Up Los Angeles Gladiators. So we saw the Gladiators turn up against the San Francisco Shark. But they don't turn up against Dallas. Dallas get an easier win against the Gladiators than they do against Shanghai. Very, very interesting. Fuel, when they turn up, they are fantastic. But this Mercy meta does not favour them whatsoever. And I think when the meta shifts into Stage 2, this will benefit Dallas quite considerably. But that ended in a 3-1 to Dallas. So, a bit of pride, Dallas get 2 wins on the board at the end. Which actually does them a lot of good going into Stage 1. Plus, Stage 2, sorry. And the first 2 games of Stage 2, I believe, are against the same opponents. They're against Shanghai and they're against the Los Angeles Gladiators. Very interesting. Big, big game after this. This is massive. Seoul must beat the Shock. Hint. But they must beat them convincingly. It must be a 4-0 or 3-0. Seoul get 3 maps. But the Shock get 2. The Shock went up 2-1 after 3 maps. Seoul were looking for answers. They did come back and win it. But because of the scoreline, they're eliminated from the playoffs. Seoul Dynasty, the arguable favourites for the league, do not make the Stage 1 playoffs. The most successful team in Overwatch history. This is the shock of the stage. Without a doubt. And I know that even without knowing the stage playoffs at the moment. This is big. And Seoul need to turn it around on Stage 2. Because I think Seoul are finding it a bit harder than they expected. A bit harder than they expected. These Western teams will start to turn out now. And Shock have got reinforcements to come back, mind. There's no Sinatra yet. After this, the Valiant were in action again. Again, this is a must-win. But it's different for the Valiant. They're not going up against Seoul this time. They went up against Shanghai. Valiant get the job done. Unlike Seoul, Valiant get the job done. They 4-0 Shanghai. This puts them, before the last 3 fixtures, this puts them in pole position for that playoff place. Better map differential than Dynasty eliminates Dynasty from the playoffs. So this is massive. And you think that this Dynasty dropped 1 map against Shanghai. And I believe they dropped a few other maps to other people. They dropped a map to Dallas. Well, in fact, they drew a map against Dallas and dropped a map against Dallas. That's 3 maps. That really changes things for Seoul. You know? So, at that stage, with 3 fixtures remaining, the remaining fixtures were New York Excelsior versus London. Massive game. Houston Outlaws taking on the Boston Uprising. Massive game. And in the stage, regular fixtures rounded off with Florida versus Philadelphia. Not much in it. But the standings at that stage, Excelsior were top with only 1 loss. London were second with 2 losses. The Valiant were in third. 3 less map differential than London. 1 more loss. But the main thing was Valiant had no more games to play. Seoul were eliminated from the playoffs, even though they had the same amount of map wins and map losses as Valiant. They had a worse differential. They were eliminated. The only people who could challenge Valiant now were Houston and Boston, both going up against each other. And this is what happened. So, the first match we had in the big batch was the New York Excelsior taking on the London Spitfire. Now, the win conditions for this. New York Excelsior, if they win, they will end the stage as the top seed. They will take at least $25,000 in prize money because they will get straight to the playoff final and not have to go through the semi-final. Now, Spitfire, on the other hand, came into this as seed number 2, behind the New York Excelsior. So Spitfire had to win this, but they had to win it by 2 maps because of their map differential. If they'd won it by 2 maps, they would then go ahead of Excelsior, become number 1 seed, and they would have a bye into the last final of the Stage 1 playoffs, and New York Excelsior would be in that semi-final. This was an extremely good game. I predicted it on Twitter to be a win for New York Excelsior. I think they are the strongest team in the league right now. And that's what happened. It was a 5-mapper, but New York Excelsior took it 3-2. What did this mean? If Spitfire had lost this 4-0, they would have not qualified for the playoffs whatsoever. So this meant Spitfire qualified for the playoffs. Excelsior, however, won, so they go in as rank 1 top seed. And they went into the final of the playoffs. London Spitfire, however, because they lost, they go in as rank 2. So, in fact, actually, that's wrong. They go in as rank 3. I'll tell you why in a minute. So Spitfire go into the playoff semi-final. Who would they face? Who would they face? Would they face Boston? Or would they face Houston? Now, you can probably work it out from what I just said about the London Spitfire. But this was another 5-mapper. Boston took them all the way. They really, really did. But Houston proved a little bit too strong. It was one hell of a fight. Because going into it, Boston were 2-1 up on map 3. They had to win on Dorado to then get themselves the win and the playoff place. They lose on Dorado. It goes to 5 maps. If Houston lose the tiebreak Lijiang Tower map, LA Valiant will be the playoff team. If Houston win it, Houston are the playoff team. Houston win it. Houston beat Boston 3-2. And so they take the final playoff place. But not only that, because of Houston's 4-0s they've been having mid-stage, they had a better map differential than the London Spitfire. So, the top 3 finished as the New York Excelsior, Houston Outlaws, London Spitfire. The Spitfire finishing 3rd, bit of a surprise, but again, something else highlights here, right? Who have London Spitfire played this week? They played the New York Excelsior, and then they played Houston. London Spitfire will have rematches against Houston and New York Excelsior in the playoffs, both of which teams they have lost to this week. Oh, it goes down, my friends. So everyone was ready and pumped to get into the playoffs, but we had one thing to sort out first. There were 2 teams who hadn't played their last game of the stage. Florida Mayhem were taking on the Philadelphia Fusion for the last regular match of the stage. Now we know with Philadelphia Fusion, they have a few problems with the consistency, and this showed. Florida put up a massive fight here, and were very, very, very close to winning it, but it ends up as a 3-2 to Philadelphia Fusion. And I think we've got to say, Fusion are experts at the Lijiang Tower Map 5 tiebreaker, because they've been on it so many times. 50% of their games have gone to tiebreakers. Something Philadelphia Fusion need to sort out if they want to contend for playoffs in Stage 2. But now we can get down to business, right? But first, I want to have a look at the standings. The standings were very interesting in the end. Spitfire didn't get the second place that they wanted. They ended up being third because of Houston's win over them. But the standings ended like this. New York Excelsior on top as number 1 seed. Now I've already said this makes them go into the final with a bye past the semi-final. Houston Outlaws finished second. London finished third. Valiant finished fourth. Seoul Dynasty finished fifth. That's a surprise. Boston finished sixth. Now, Boston didn't get the win they needed over Houston to get into the playoffs, but I think they're going to be pretty strong going into the future, and especially as they may well actually refine some of their dive work, which is working really well for them right now. Seventh, we have the Fusion. Fusion, again, need to work on their inconsistency, like I said just now. They can't drop two maps to people like Shanghai and Florida. If they want to get up into those playoffs, it's just not good enough. And it shows because they have a negative map differential, yet they have the same record as Boston, who have plus 10. The Gladiators finished 8th. Again, inconsistency, they got stuff to work on. The Shock finished 9th. The Shock will be stronger later on, because they have players like Sinatra coming in. Fuel finishing 10th. Yeah, that was the surprise of the stage, wasn't it? Along with Seoul. Dallas have got problems with communication, and I think they will be stronger in the new meta that will be coming in stage 2, so watch out for that. Florida 11th. Yeah, Florida have got stuff to work on, but again, I think they're a team that can grow into the Overwatch League. And Shanghai 12th with 10 losses out of 10. Yeah, Shanghai have got some problems. They are close to signing the first female player in the Overwatch League. She is a Zarya main, but she's also she's basically an off tank. So this should be interesting for the Dragons. So, now we've dealt with the fixtures and the standings. We go into the 2 biggest matches of the stage. The ones that actually win you money. So, London Spitfire obviously finished 3rd. Houston finished 2nd. So there's your playoff. London Spitfire taking on the Houston Outlaws. Now, one issue for London is the 2 teams they would have to face if they made it past the semi-final. Houston and New York. Both teams they lost to this week, causing them to lose their number 1 seed. Now, London go into this in a run of bad form, and Houston go into it with a good run of form and momentum. So, it was very interesting. I watched it all live, and London had a few problems in the first match against Houston with shutting down Jake on his Junkrat. And if they were too busy trying to shut down Jake, then Coolmat on D.Va or Linkser, the other DPS, would be getting space to cause London problems. And the same can be said for the first map on Dorado. London didn't know how to respond to Houston, even though Dorado was the map they took off them earlier in the week. So, after map 1, you're wondering, London are actually going to get some problems here. How are they going to respond to this? By Jesus, they respond. They 2-0 Houston on Ilios. London are not a good control map team. So, that's a real plus for London. They then 2-0 them on Temple of Anubis. The defense of Temple of Anubis, point A, by London was absolutely phenomenal. Phenomenal. And then Spitfire stumble on their attack of Eichenwald. They don't get it to the gates of the castle. And they don't manage to batter down the doors. But, again, defense prevails. They lock out Houston Outlaws. Houston don't even take the payload. Massive for London. They don't even have to go to a game 5. So London beat the Houston Outlaws 3-1. Houston missed out on the money, but London advanced, securing them at least $25,000. But now they have bigger things to worry about. The New York Excelsior, number 1 seed, 9-1 in the league so far. So, the first game was on Junkertown, and historically this is a bad map for Korean teams, but it doesn't really work in London Spitfire's favour. It was a long map. You had Pine coming in, which was very interesting. Pine normally used on control maps for New York Excelsior. But they both finished their attack rounds. It's 2-2. We go into a bonus round. London 3, New York Excelsior 4. Yes, London managed to push it to just the bridge because they didn't have much time left on Junkertown, the second bridge. And New York kind of pushed through. London tried to perform a cute tactic on their last defense of Junkertown, where they rolled Quad Tank Moira Lucio. It didn't really pay off. It was a very good idea from London, but again, they left themselves with such little time, they didn't really have much of a choice. So then you're looking at it, and you're thinking, London are in some trouble here, because they're very bad on control maps, especially Oasis. Oasis is our next map. It's map 2. Now, Pine is subbed out for Sabiobi, and there are no real massive changes to the Spitfire lineup, although Uyol does come out for Fury. And London's Oasis woes continue, and Excelsior lock them out 2-0. This puts Excelsior 2-0 up at half time. Bearing in mind the playoffs are best of 5, first to 3. It can go to a map 6 if there's a draw on one of the maps. The next is Horizon Lunar Colony. Now, London have to win this. It's essential they win this. And New York Excelsior take both points in their attack run. So do London. But London give themselves a lot more time in the bank. New York Excelsior running an iffy dive comp that they're not that used to. And it caused some problem for them. Especially the Genji, which didn't look up to scratch. And also Yanis on the Winston, especially on Horizon Lunar Colony, did not look his best. London take it 3-2, locking New York Excelsior out on their attack of their second attack on point A of Horizon Lunar Colony very well. But New York Excelsior looked disjointed. They looked unhappy. London keep themselves in the tie. It's currently 2-1 to New York Excelsior. We go to Numbani. Numbani is an interesting one. You can see interesting things coming on in Numbani. Excelsior is an interesting one, right? Spitfire attack first. It takes them virtually all of their time to actually get the payload moving. They are in overtime when the payload starts moving, and they get their extra bit of time. And they end up stopping just before the second point on Numbani. So it's 1-0 in that tie. New York Excelsior coming for their attack round. They're shut out. They don't get the point. They don't take the payload. It got very hairy at the end. They were very, very close to taking it. But London, their defense holds strong. That game on Numbani finishes 1-0. London bring it back to 2-2 overall. And we go to Dorado. Dorado. The game they lost to Houston in the semi-final. How interesting. But the game they won against New York Excelsior earlier in the day in the regular fixtures. This was the $100 game. You win this game, you get the $100. You lose this game, you get the $25,000. $100,000. No pain, still same yobby. New York continue to run their dive. At this point, this was London's 14th map of this week. They have played more maps than anyone else. Now, London gets through the first gate of Dorado in the first point at the very last second. They were in overtime when it happened. They then get the ball rolling though. They roll through the streets. And then they come into the main end complex. They get stopped just beyond the bridge. So they don't complete the map. All New York Excelsior need to do is complete the map. And they win stage 1. Excelsior come out. And they get past the first checkpoint. Fairly easily, if I remember rightly. And then they get stuck on streets. They get stuck on streets. They don't make it to the second checkpoint. London Spitfire are the Overwatch League Stage 1 playoff champions. They are the Stage 1 winners. 14 maps they played. It was a test of endurance, and London really showed what they were made of. They reached another level in the semi-final and the final. They really did. And it's something we need to see from Spitfire, and if they can continue playing like they did, they will be unstoppable. They will be unstoppable, and it's a shame that their league standings right now are not reflecting how good they can play. They're third. They've lost 3 games. So, it's interesting. Stuff to work on, though. Player of the match was Birdring. Birdring's defense on Widowmaker was insane. He was hitting so many shots. He was winning the battle with Sabiobi's Widowmaker. And New York Excelsior didn't have an answer for the defensive Widowmaker. And it kind of gave Birdring a free rein to do what he wants. London really turned up. And I suggest if you haven't, you go and watch the VOD. It was one hell of a game. And I was up very late watching it. It's unbelievable. It really was an unbelievable game. But that is the end of stage 1. And next week, obviously, there are no games. So what does that mean for the Overwatch League Roundup? I will do a video summarising stage 1 and then looking at ahead at our first fixtures for stage 2, which could be very interesting. It's a very interesting one for Dallas Fuel, and it's a very interesting one for Spitfire, I believe, as well. I can't remember quite clearly now. But yes, stage 1 is at an end. It's been a great stage. Some teams with work to do, some teams proving that they can actually tear other teams apart. But New York Excelsior are still number 1 seed, remember that. And they're still a very powerful team. They just couldn't match London Spitfire in the playoffs. And let's go back with New York Excelsior, right? New York Excelsior have been around for a while. And they were always a brand in competitive Overwatch. They came into Overwatch as a previous team. And they had some issues with choking in playoff matches. Maybe that is something we will see from NYXL in the future. And if it is something that's a problem, they need to sort it out, because obviously playoff matches are everything in the Overwatch League. But for now, I'm going to leave this Overwatch League Roundup video here. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next week. See you then!